Hey, how's it going, everybody? JT here on behalf of the EV Mavericks, inviting you and welcoming you to this 134th episode, the Blockchain and Belief, the Professors Roundtable. I've got a pack of friends that I roped in from all parts of the Ivy League school systems to hang out with some guy in Kansas. So we hail from our Ethereum. I was able to go to Princeton University back in November to do a presentation on behalf of the EV Mavericks and the R Ethereum community on Reddit. And somehow, some way, I swindled these professors to come onto our podcast to shoot the bull for a little bit. Without wasting too much time, I'm going to go straight into the accolades. I want to introduce everybody. First off, we got Carolyn Biltoff. She's a PhD from Princeton University, Associate Professor of International History and Politics at the Geneva Graduate Institute. Carolyn writes on the relationships between the history and epistemology and economic thought since the 18th century. Her acclaimed book, A Violent Peace, Truth, Media, and the Power at the League of Nations explores media, propaganda, and truth claims in early global institutions and contains a chapter on counterfeit currency in the age of fascism. Carolyn is also the founding editor of Capitalism, A Journey of History and Economics. Andrew Chignell is a professor at Princeton University Center of Human Values with appointments in religion and philosophy. His research spans the work of Immanuel Kant and other Enlightenment philosophers, philosophy of religion, epistemology, and the ethics of belief, and topics in moral psychology like hope and despair. Then moving on down, let's see, I'm going to make sure. Devin P. Singh, hi Devin. Devin holds a PhD from Yale University, Associate Professor of Religion at Dartmouth College. His work examines intersections of Christian thought with economy, politics, money, and secularization. Recent publications include the book Economy and Modern Christian Thought and an ongoing project on the religious and social roles of debt. You can check him out at devinsingh.com. And then finally, Mike Meisels. Mike is the executive director of Princeton University's D Center, and I've got this on the second screen. It's happening on Discord, I promise. D Center, Blockchain and Decentralization Research with a background in interdisciplinary technology and societal change. He leads efforts to advance education, research, and policy around blockchain's potential shift to power structures. He co-directs major events like the D-Center's annual spring conference on decentralization's infrastructure and implications. You can find him at dcenter.princeton.edu. And I want to make sure, do we have Gordon Grant? No, he's not here yet. But
he's coming in 2 minutes. That's what I was hopping off the call to do. So my role often is to be a catalyst connector of smart people. Jeremiah, thank you so much for that. I felt like we're back at home in academia where everybody's whole bios and books got read. It's funny to see the way the different rituals go from one to the other. Would it be okay if I just said a quick moment of like how this whole thing came together? And then really, I do want to hear most of the other four talking heads on this call. But I am Mike Meisels. I'm the executive director of the D Center. I'm the founding executive director. It's important to me that I came into this role with a background which is diffuse, perhaps as Jeremiah said, but to me, I was and still remain a historian of art. So I did a PhD in art history in 2013, held positions museum curator, professor, a bunch of different things, and wanted to be a historian of the art of the future, which meant somehow finding a way to author the history of art forwardly, which I quickly realized involved becoming a student of the money flows behind it. So I wound up writing a book on the kind of idea that financial innovation was a motor force in art history, and then leaving my academic job, with one semester left on my tenure clock to do an MBA because I wanted to sell out. I wasn't sure what that meant, but I wanted to just bury my head into the money side of the world. And wasn't sure though who would want to do that, and then COVID hit, and then NFT boom summer, and then as somebody who had written a lot on Andy Warhol and had left the academy in part what I felt was bad faith of saying boo Jeff Koons but yay Andy Warhol, I was like, no, screw this, I'm throwing my lot in with these people and we'll see what happens on the other side of it. So flash forward, I fell in love with a lot of what happens in blockchain beyond the art of it, the market, the science, the a million different things. There was so much to love. I feel like I get to be a kid in a candy store waking up every day and studying something new. But one of the most salient experiences I had near the beginning of my time in the sector basically involved, I got hired as a tokenomics expert, which I wasn't, on a high concept NFT. What I became was a kind of like dramaturg for it. And the whole project unfolded. The game got launched, thousands of people playing this thing online. And I decided to go walk around in the world, see what would happen, see what it was like to talk to these people that were playing this game that I had helped create. And I wanted to ask them about metaphor. The whole thing was about like Mickey Mouse becoming open source IP. So it had to do with like the kind of like release of like strictures around thought. Nobody gave a shit. What they kept asking me was when token. Like, I bought a ticket to this thing. When can I resell the token to this thing? And I had this kind of flash moment that I was like, this is what like God answering questions about like Little League baseball games must be like. It's like, I've given you the mysteries of the universe and you care who wins the baseball game. Like, why are you praying to me about this? Like, and I remember having this thought. It's like, this is why God must have invented prophets and rabbis, because you can't go around talking to the normies. And then once I had that thought, I kept seeing, I'm going to call it religious organizational design structures. I myself was brought up in kind of like observant religious community. I'm not anymore. It doesn't matter, except for it's just my own like, mental way of viewing the world. But I started seeing that like congregational design question everywhere. How the companies were built, how the token communities were managed, how people talked to each other, how they thought about ritual and faith, and like the mystery Satoshi founding text, and like down 1,000 different rabbit holes. And the first thing I did, was read Devin's book on this when I was thinking about all of this, because I was an academic, a cultural historian at heart, working in the crypto industry. And I kept trying to talk to my coworkers like, yo, I read this super cool book. It's called Divine Currency. This super smart professor at Dartmouth wrote it. Like, do you want to do a book club? Nobody wanted to do a book club. So when I returned into the academy and was given this interdisciplinary steering committee, including this super cool Kantian coin trading professor on my steering committee, like, oh, who's got an idea for a kind of outside the box workshop? I was like, I got something, right? Faith and finance have been intertangled for millennia. They might remain intertangled in this tiny little narrow cosmos we've decided to inhabit. People forget how small the blockchain world is for how like much attention it gets. Remember the total value locked on chain, it's like probably less than the GDP of Guatemala. Like Gordon could probably give us a directional example there for how small the world we're actually talking about is, but it's so fast. So it fast forwards through all of these trajectories. And it was like, how can I take this world of ideas of Devin, Singh, and Andrew, and Caroline, my new friend in this whole sector, and apply them to understanding what's happening in Gordon's? And with that, I'm going to turn myself on mute and let like all of my new amazing friends riff on these ideas.
Hey, that was splendid. And while he's here, Gordon Grant has showed up. His intro: seasoned cryptocurrency trader, derivatives expert, graduating from Princeton with a focus on econometrics and quantitative finance. There's a word for you. He built his early career as a derivatives portfolio manager before he discovered Bitcoin in 2013 and made a full pivot to digital assets, and played a pivotal role at Genesis Trading. And ChiSquared or ChiSquared Technologies, is that where you are at now? Gordon, welcome. Thanks for coming today.
Yes, of course. Yeah, Greek letter chi, there being the relevant one. And of course, if you've done any stochastic processes in your great undergraduate work at an institution like Princeton, which I had the privilege of doing, chi-squared is a special case of the gamma distribution, which imposes certain assumptions about the relationship between the rate and shape parameter. But in any case, yes, you can tell where my mind is and has been and is going. I'm very much a financial quant who stumbled into the blockchain space after having spent a decade trading volatility instruments on a variety of macro assets. And ever since then, I've been more or less doing the same in crypto with an entrepreneurial bent and increasingly using a lot of balance sheet to help generate alpha on top of crypto balances, as well as develop data tools, products, systems, and what I like to think of as increasingly programmatic intelligence to be collaborative in that process. So it's great to be here. Always fascinated by the work that you've done. I love hearing Mike tell his story each and every time. It's a beautiful journey that I think all of us have had within the digital asset ecosystem, and it continues to evolve here. I just got back from a brief trip to a major exchange's private conference down in the Bahamas earlier this week and got to hear their executives and luminaries and leading clients talk about their own journey, including a guy that had exactly $3,000 in his account and bought some ETH on margin at $7 from Kraken way back when. And I think it's fair to say he owns an island in the Bahamas now. So it's with a lot of love that that we get to show up here and talk about where we've been in crypto and what we're doing and where we're going. And crypto, I use it much more broadly to implicate everything that's associated with transformative themes in financial and monetary systems.
Super quick on that note, during the Dow hack, when the price dipped below $7, I did $300 on credit card, which is a different kind of margin. And
well, this was it. I think that was credit card. I'll let this man tell his own story. I wish we had him here today, but literally it was that day. I think that he was doing a credit card margin on the Kraken, something amazing.
Well, listen, I don't own a small
I was
island.
Be on mute, but I actually have a thought of where to go from here.
Hit it.
So, Caroline, I want to actually ask you to step forward for a minute, because I have been thinking about these ideas with Gordon and Devin and Andrew to one extent or another over, let's call it 14 to 16 months we've been in touch. You're much newer to all of this. And it's also very interesting to me that you're the editor of a journal called Capitalism, right? So what we're talking about styles itself potentially as a next chapter or a part of a next chapter in the history of that story. And I guess I would be curious to know, what you've made of all of this so far. Is this an interesting analogy? Is there some projective into the future, power around these kinds of analogies? Is there scholarship to do here? Is this kind of just fun cocktail party conversation? As a newer voice in this group, I'd be very curious to take your broad temperature.
Yeah, I mean, I think why also just to cite Devin's book, I think the reason why faith and finance is a pretty natural and very fertile intersection for thinkers is just simply because also questions of faith have so long pivoted on questions of how is it virtuous or not to have beyond what you need for material survival. And so anytime money changes, I think how money is structured and how it's created and how it circulates and how it's distributed, it always will inherently, I think, re-evoke or re-summon questions of the virtues of the system as it stands and the virtues of accumulating wealth beyond a certain degree or not, right? So I just think that, yes, intellectually, this is a fascinating intersection. And because value and values, right? Anytime value gets reorganized, so do values. And so it just becomes this accretion point or inflection point where you can do a lot of thinking, right? Thinking that may or may not help you make money. Sometimes it does, right? Gordon, as you know, thinker and moneymaker, but just also thinking, right? Just good thinking. It's just a good thing to think with the money object, and that technology has revolutionized it yet again in these very precise ways. Just like the printing press did, every new technological revolution, I think, also remakes the relationship between matter and spirit, between the material world and the immaterial domain. And so it is this natural place to be thinking, I think. So yeah, that's to say I feel very...
So I see some divergent themes in the conversations that we're having. There is faith in the monetary instrument itself, like the US dollar is a faith-based instrument, and the social value, the belief in it is what gives us its value. And you could say the same thing for Bitcoin, ETH, or Microsoft stock, or whatever. Then there is the religiosity, the social structures, the tribes of crypto, and Vitalik or Satoshi is a god, and the other people are evil or something, and everyone tearing into each other in kind of meta-religious wars as we fight for mind share. And then there are the values of the chain and the narrative of the chain, where people would say, look, we're able to help the bankless and provide financial services to billions of more people. We're able to raise money and from larger circles than we've ever been able to do in collective fundraising. And these are all sort of, as you say, there's ethics in there, there's religiosity in there, there's belief in there, there's faith in there. And a fourth one that we haven't brought up, I'd say, is the power of the blockchain to fight misinformation. And there's a few technologies that are on the blockchain that are relevant to that. If we have time, we can get into there, right? So just meta-analysis of what we're talking about. Which of those topics do we want to pick at naturally for the panel that's on here?
I'm going to defer to Devin before I answer that question, or
that's
Andrew,
a good idea.
or the other smarter people, and then I'll chime in. But that's a really
Devin, it was your book that inspired this. You picked
it.
I mean, I was just looking at
I was just looking at Devin's book, and the first line is, "It has been commonplace today to speak of a widespread so-called faith and hope in money and markets." So the faith and hope theme sounding right at the beginning of Devin's book. I mean, I think that's a really interesting part of the blockchain story, which sounded like it was the first point that was just
Right.
brought up.
It'd
Is
be
that
like we would talk about things like the recent precious metal trade where silver's
yeah,
up like 180% last year, and people saying the dollar is down, what, 12% against the euro, et cetera. There is changing faith around the world in different monetary instruments. Bitcoin and Ether have been sort of fighting for they themselves are money, store of value, digital gold, these types of memes, and fighting for mind share of society, not even just in the US, but globally, to uh, advocate for the legitimacy of these assets as money, right?
and tell a sort of narrative around them that sounds a lot, as Mike was saying, that sounds a lot like some historical religious stories. I mean, the founding text, the prophet who leaves behind the gospel and then disappears, might come back someday, reactivate the wallet. Then the Reformation comes along and people decide, no, we need a new protocol. It's got to have smart contracts. So you get the first breakup.
Yeah, and the pseudoscience, quantum is going to crack his wallet next, and that's going to be the end of
And all the
everything.
meme coins are like the radical Reformation. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of interesting things.
Something Noah's Ark and lost keys.
Exactly. Yeah. But anyway, Devin, I'm curious if
Yeah.
that's
Where do you want to go, Devin?
Sure. Yeah. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that was a wonderful sort of summary of these different angles, and I'll put a pin in the information point because I think that relates to questions about trust, right? And this issue of what sort of system of value can be trusted, and there's these claims about the blockchain sort of securing information in a way that other systems perhaps can't attain to that level of a certain kind of transparency. So I think we can also let's keep a pin in that in terms of questions of trust and information flow. And
Mike, CC Joe Lubin's talk about trust over our dinner. I wish we had that on replay, but I mean, Devin, you and Joe Lubin up here already on it. That's amazing.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I mean, a lot of angles, but I think certainly this question of does it make sense to talk about cryptocurrency, whether as a technology, as an asset, as well as the communities around it, as a kind of religious movement, or are there religious or theological themes that are there? Is it illuminating to talk about it in those ways, right? And I think those are some of the things that have been named here. Yeah, and I've studied money sort of in this long historical arc, as Mike mentioned, looking at it really in the ancient world as it's sort of evolved over various phases of history, but then the ways that religious thought has drawn from it, has drawn from types of exchanges, notions of currency and money, as well as the ways that religious thought has influenced how we think about value, how we think about exchange, right? So these kind of two seemingly separate systems, economy, money, markets on one hand, religion, piety, theology on the other, have been influencing each other over centuries. And this question of, I think, representation is one that was very interesting to me. It's kind of an abstract idea, right? But the way that money is a kind of token that's trying to indicate abstract value in some way, to indicate something that is, in some sense, invisible, and yet it has these material instantiations, whether it's coins, whether it's Babylonian clay tablets, whether it's scrolls, now whether it's digital, digital form. But it's still gesturing toward this thing, whether it's transcendence, whether it's value, whether it's hope, whether it's trust, right? And crypto is this really interesting case where I think we can see this like very clear. It's like a screen that we are projecting a variety of things upon, right? Like people are bringing to it so many different desires, hopes, etc. And so it serves as this way, as this kind of channel of doing that in the way that deities do, in the way that transcendence does, in the way that religion has kind of channeled that language of hope and aspiration and change, as well as value. I looked at the ways that early Christian thinkers, when they were talking about how, for example, Jesus was the incarnation of God, they were looking at coins and saying, well, the same way that a coin can represent the emperor and mirror the emperor's image and mirror the sort of administration of the empire, Jesus as the son is doing this for the Father, right? So there's this wild like abstract language of like how does something that's material capture this value, and you see them going back and forth between like, oh, money's doing this, oh, this is kind of how the Trinity is doing this, right? Like super just wild esoteric stuff. And I think this is why crypto is interesting to me as well, is another iteration in this long chain of playing around with representation. What does it mean to represent value? What does it mean to represent trust? What does it mean to represent our sort of joint commitments to one another in terms of our pledges, in terms of our promises, right? And how can we be sure in that? And we can certainly talk about the sort of Bitcoin versus Ethereum differentiations, rivalries, et cetera. But I think a lot of that's bound up with the ways that those communities see each other and see their differences, right? Is how are we capturing these things in ways?
One thing I think that's interesting is there's an aspect of trust in all money, and there's kind of a shared, you have different believers, and the faith in each monetary unit and the values it exposes kind of shifts over time and around the world. And one thing that blockchains as a technology do is they lower the friction between moving one form of money to another, right? So there isn't a 2-day settlement. You can't get deplatformed by Swift, right? If I wanted to go and change from one token to another on a blockchain, it can be done in basically a tenth of a second, right? Across however many hops that takes on whatever dexes, across multi-chains coming, right? And so as you lower the friction to hold anything, any form of store of value or wealth or monetary denomination, equity, precious metal, token, whatever, you really start to see a freedom of expression on the blockchain. And then money becomes really a much tighter market, or a much tighter, there's a war over this faith that plays out in much more real time, right? Than if you have all the friction. So if you're someone that has a bunch of Russian rubles, for example, the friction between that and US dollars, if you wanted to hold US dollars, is a very difficult thing. With blockchains, it will probably be less difficult, right? Same thing if you're someone in Turkey holding the lira and experiencing massive amounts of deflation. Your ability to just opt out of that system is much easier with blockchains, and to hold some US dollar equivalent with stablecoins, right?
And how about this one? Your ability to opt out of the dollar right now has never been easier, right? And this is where it starts to get really crazy, I think, for me. And I'd love to ask Devin, like, what happens when faith in an entire belief system dies? When people go, he wasn't a prophet, he was a charlatan, and this whole thing was completely bogus. Where you have like a that moment in Guyana where everyone realizes they're not going to heaven, they just swallowed a cyanide pill, and how does that relate to perceptions about monetary systems? So yes.
Can I add a correlate to this that is actually like extremely importantly, sorry?
Was that the Fed as Jim Jones?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Exactly. So, that's the question. I leave it to you and Devin, but and it's
so this is also, I actually have an ask of you, Devin, and Caroline, I think, and Andrew too. Devin, I think the most, but the three true historians, in my opinion, on this call, like I actually legitimately have an ask related to what Gordon said. I have the same question, and I would phrase it differently, and it has to do with the reappearance of centralization. So there is a problem finance, computer science are wrestling with, in a quantitative perspective, as you try to make the system dispersed and it accidentally glues together on the edges again. And I have been insisting to my computer science faculty director that there are historical analogs to this kind of thing, where we had a debate. Okay, the printing press, a great decentralizing technology. Okay, which is more centralized, Catholic Church or this tiny little dissident cult religion you joined, where maybe the guy who's in charge of your town is telling you who you can and can't marry, but it's just this one little micro community? Which one of those is more decentralized? Is that question even meaningful to ask in that way? So I actually have a paper I want to drop in the chat. It's from a finance professor at NYU that basically says you can have either decentralized or transparent in blockchain. You cannot have both. There's a mathematical impossibility result to that effect. And I want to ask the same question basically that Gordon asked, where what happens when it turns out that we get to just be nice to each other? We'll be decentralized. We won't have to go to war. Everybody will pray to the Prince of Peace, right? When everybody prays to the same Prince of Peace, we've got like war councils governing whose borders is what's going on where. So like, what can our space learn from you so that we can maybe avoid any of the mistakes of the past. Maybe. That's my ask.
Yeah, no pressure there, right? Learning from history to perfect the new system. I mean, one of your points is really interesting, right? It raises this issue of like, is it about decentralized or centralized, or is it a matter of scale, right? Is it about scales of centralization? And maybe that's really what's at stake here in terms of where we choose to actually locate the centralization. Is it sort of like national level, global level versus communal level? But I mean, part of the reason why I think there are a number of reasons why we see this kind of recurring historically. But one of those is this whole issue of value that we've already touched on. Is what does it mean? Like, arguably, I think there's a consensus needed. If something like value is going to be meaningful, there's a consensus that's needed in some way so that we can sort of have, like, again, within whatever sort of scale, whether it's a group, a community, a town, a nation, some kind of agreement on what is valuable so that we can then engage in whatever it is we want to engage in, exchanges, make promises that then tomorrow can be fulfilled, or, make some sort of commitment that can happen in the future, right? So that need for a kind of consensus lends itself then to authority figures or authorizing institutions, authorizing structures to then say, hey, like, I'm gonna put this flag down here and say, this is where like value is located. This is where it's anchored. This is how we're going to keep it sequestered, et cetera, right? And this would be, again, like one sort of pushback or critique of this notion that the blockchain is fully decentralized and fully trust-based is there's this potential way to read it critically as, well, we're just deflecting our trust to the various nodes, to the various servers on a system that are able to stabilize this. And so it's just it's really a question of where we're placing that trust. It's not just sort of magically emerging, but there's a trust in the code. There's a trust in, again, the nodes that are part of the network. And so, is that necessarily, what are the sorts of qualitative and quantitative differences between that and other forms of centralization?
I mean, I think there's really interesting cross currents here, some of which we talked about in November, but there is all this talk about trust and the need for trust in some of these systems, but then there's a huge valorization of the idea of trustlessness, where by removing middlemen and the Fed and various governments and potential censors and so forth, you no longer have to trust anybody at all. There's some kind of like transparency / lack of trust that is idealized also in this picture. And that kind of goes against the thought that there's a religious vibe here, because I think like 19th century theologian Friedrich Schleiermacher says that the essence of the religious mind is the feeling of absolute dependence. So a kind of, I am, like a kind of infant with respect to the universe. I'm fairly helpless, and God is this kind of ultimate thing on which we all depend for our being and flourishing and so forth. And that kind of work, that if that's what the essence of being religious is, that works against this like drive for not having to trust anybody, for setting up a protocol that is, I mean, in some technical sense, trustless, but also I think in an emotional sense, trustless.
So there's always at least
that as a kind of diabolical impulse in the space. It's like satanic pride not to have to trust.
Yeah. Well, if I just want to comment on that briefly. Part of what's interesting about that language of trustlessness is part of what I was gesturing to with my comments, is that I think that deflects the reality that there's profound trust in the code and in the system, right? So it's not a question of trustlessness, it's location of trust, right? So maybe we don't need to trust fallible human beings. Now we can trust the code and it's going to be infallible. The religious correlate to that is ritual, and trust in ritual, trust in the process. And so if we do this ritual properly, if we follow these steps properly, we will receive X, Y, and Z. There will be X, Y, and Z outcome. We will be purified. We will be blessed. The community will remain together. We will not be condemned, whatever it may be, right? So I think there is a way to look at that. There's a logic to that ritual process. Yeah, a logic to that ritual process that I think we see similarly being kind of captured in trust in the code.
We see the same thing in government, right? Like what creates outcome legitimacy? If legitimacy is a rare source, how do you create legitimacy? One way that you create legitimacy is it comes from an authority that everyone believes in, has faith in. Another way to create legitimacy is by following the rituals we've all agreed on, right? And that would be the argument for Well, right. There's an old joke, like if the facts are on your side, pound the facts. If the law is on your side, pound the law. If neither's on your side, shout real loud. Right. So it's everyone wants to win the mind share, and one way to win the mind share is to follow the process and have faith in the process. In this case, it's faith in the code, or faith in the cryptographic math, or faith that people are choosing to run the correct and version of the software. Right. That layer 0 hasn't been corrupted in some way. If you have to have faith back to a person somehow.
Yeah, it's somehow technology and computers and protocols seems like a deeper and more stable foundation than the rituals that a lot of religions offer.
Yeah, as long as people run the right math, right?
Right.
Which is what I said. It always comes back to a choice at the end of the day of people on, especially with blockchains, where we get these sort of majority consensus that's happening, right?
Yeah.
Now, how we get who gets to vote comes ultimately from how much money you have, generally, right? Even in Bitcoin, more machines you have is more capital investment, means you get more votes, and you get to decide what's the legitimate chain. In Ether, you get these proof of stake or something, and that says how many votes you have based on how much money you've put forth. But ultimately, we come to a majority consensus somehow. A 51% attack, right, becomes possible, and so the faith is in that people are choosing to run a non-corrupt version of the software.
I mean, I just have something on this because I'm sort of a historian of technology also, and technology's relationship to thought and the structuring of thought and belief. And I think one of the things we see consistently when we look from writing forward, right? So what does writing do? Writing allows Hesiod to stabilize the Greek pantheon away from the world of orality into a kind of stable doctrine and ritual system. But then the irony of that is it becomes legible as a genre instead of as a belief. So the very thing that allows trust or faith to become stable and possible also destabilizes the hegemony of that system. So I think the interesting thing about crypto is that this is a monetary religion built through a nascent technology. And so it has inherently within itself both the stabilizing and the destabilizing force, and I think that's the really interesting thing about crypto, because it sort of reveals something that's always been true about the relationship between the word and the spirit, right? It brings back to our eye the transhistorical process by which religion has been, like with the Protestant Reformation, as both Devin and Andrew suggested. Print destabilizes Catholic hegemony. It renders nascent forms of belief possible, right? But those will be destabilized in turn. So Protestantism is destabilized through the Book of Mormon. So I think, just for the historian who, I'm so sorry, I am even less than philosophers am I useful for giving good policy advice, right? Historians have nothing much to say truly about how to make a better future, but there is something about the sensitivity to just being aware as you're dealing with these instruments, for those of you who are traders, is that there are always stabilizing and destabilizing forces inside technology, right? They do both simultaneously. They create trust, and they also make it possible to disrupt a faith system, right? So I think for me, as the historical perspective is just, that's what's so cool as crypto as an object of study. And I have no crypto in my life anywhere, right? Financially. So
we should change that.
But it does absolutely. It is a fascinating object, right? For thinking how people put their faith in things to try to make their lives better, right? And why money and God are kind of the pocket, strategy for trying to improve
even
your
God
life.
needs 10%.
Exactly. So just the trans-historical view and what crypto makes possible for us to rethink about the ancient period, the early modern period, the Industrial Revolution, right? So for me, that's the exciting thing about talking to all you, is that there's a lot of material for the historian to rethink, just because what crypto is revealing for us.
Can I riff on this just for a second? Because the birth of Bitcoin was as a result of the 2008 financial crisis, and people lost faith in the US dollar. As a result of that, Bitcoin was born. But pound for pound, and maybe Gordon and LogrisTheBard could correct me if I'm wrong, since that time and the advent of cryptocurrency and the speed at which, and I say this as a cryptocurrency advocate, there has been more scams and more devilish behavior within that space than probably the US $100 bill has in the same amount of time. I know the US $100 bill like funds terrorism and does other things around the world that are bad, so we can lose faith in that too. But it's like, man, for all the belief and the provability that a blockchain gives us and the faith in the code, it sure does seem like there's a lot of grifters in the space too. I just wanted to point that out.
That's an accountability thing.
Sure.
So it's totally possible to write a smart contract that has a 2-day settlement period, or that gives a bank administrative controls, allows them to claw back funds, or do other things that would help to deal with the grift. It's also totally possible to have people choose not to use that, right? So no one ever forced someone to buy Bitcoin. They might have stolen it with a wrench from someone, but I don't think anyone's ever forced someone to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum with force, right? Whereas governments have definitely forced you to have U.S. dollars. If you don't pay your taxes in it, like you got problems, right?
Yeah. Not to mention Northrop Grumman and Lockheed.
That's part of the. But there was also the very troubling Chainalysis report that came out yesterday, right? And I think any moral reckoning of what's been unloosed here has to attend to terrorist financing, money laundering, that is real, right? The pirates all hang out together, and some of them believe
they
in
are
egalitarian
crypto
for sure. But I think what I'm saying is it's a different point. It's not so much the scammers, right? It's the we're going to call them baddies who want to use this tech for their own ends, because the idea is this tech is available now, and to try to put a priority list on who gets to use it is to violate the whole spirit of it in the first place. And yet, now it will be used by anyone, and it will be used by anyone to do all manner of bad things. And to me, any position on this idea that says, okay, but nobody forced us to use the US dollar, is to totally sidestep the responsibility to try to mitigate harm from anything that you've introduced into the world, right? Or at least be thoughtful about it, right? To me, there's one thing to be able to say, okay, great, we're going to have more money launderers probably than the banking system, even though we like to twist the facts and it's total value locked and transaction volume. There are more scammers and money launderers in crypto than there are using Swift. I just will tell you that, right? And we have to get our heads around what we want to do about that and how we want to talk about that to the outside world rather than sidestepping the issue. I don't know, Gordon, do you have an opinion about this? You and I have talked a lot about, we have this thing at Princeton that we always do that we call internally Bitcoin for good. There are incredible people who are using this technology to achieve phenomenal human rights ends. And to me, I want to do a better job and hold an event I'm going to call Bitcoin for bad, because I think we have to be able to talk about both facets of this here. Gordon, I'd be curious to let you riff on that.
Yeah. Well, I look at this, just sort of like faith, right? Faith can be used. Faith systems, belief systems can be used to do awful things and amazing things in terms of human action and I would say, total social utility holistically. Where this is kind of interesting, Bitcoin for bad and Bitcoin for good, it has now been reported that Venezuela has something like 500,000 units of Bitcoin that they've stockpiled over time. You could argue that was done by stripping resources from the people, thieving gold from national coffers, converting it to Bitcoin. The forensic exercise is ongoing, and that the Bitcoin itself may have been used to, repress the people of Venezuela. Now it also has the chance to do good, depending on what happens, because the country is totally bankrupt and the revenues from oil don't appear to be immediately flowing to their coffers. And when they do, they'll be paying Uncle Sam first. But that 100,000, 600,000 units of Bitcoin, if used smartly, could literally be a lifeline, or it could also be another tool for oppression because of the nature of the asset, right? Unlike if it were gold or treasuries or some other kind of asset that sat in the traditional system where it could be frozen or blocked. Aside from, the OFAC deciding to blacklist every single one of Venezuela's wallets, it's in this Schrodinger's cat kind of box right now. And, are we going to find a fetid carcass when we pop this thing open? Or are we going to find, kind of the great, C.S. Lewis lion-inspired Aslan kind of character? So I think that bad and good, right? The duality of the asset is what makes it really interesting, because we're actually, as a belief system, we're also, in some sense, I think the world is asking the question, are we dealing with the, kind of an angry, vengeful God from the primordial ages? Or are we dealing with sort of a Unitarian Universalist, soft, benevolent, sort of being there that's good for everybody in every circumstance, no matter what you do? So that's how I see it. And there are many other examples. And to your point, Bitcoin for bad, they're an increasing example of a number of autocratic states that are cottoning on to Bitcoin. Not a surprise, Turkmenistan, which I think by all accounts, much as I love the Caspian Basin and the former Silk Road countries for all their cultural richness, including, horse meat and desert polo games and, sturgeon kebab, that is a very backward country that until recently had to issue exit visas for its own citizens, i.e. as a Turkmen citizen, you couldn't leave unless the government said you could. They're now embracing Bitcoin, and not in the way that people want. They are not allowing it to be used as legal tender, but they are allowing the world's fourth largest gas reserves to be switched on to mine the heck out of this asset and make it part of the state coffers, which is pretty wild when you think about it, right? Because the supposed self-sovereign asset that ensures independence is now being taken by, a young upstart autocrat that I think might see it as a way to build another solid marble palace on the ruins of Merv.
This looks like a re-emergence of the Munster Rebellion problem to me.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, your question about ethics links back to your question about centralization or decentralization, because it strikes me like the burden on crypto communities is to answer the question, can communities be effectively self-governed? Or not, then do they need a strongman? Do they need an autocrat? Do they need a centralization, right? If you can't get your shit together to actually govern yourselves well.
I mean, this is true for all of humanity, right?
You are liable, exactly. Right? You're
like
liable
this is true for climate change.
You're liable to, centralized takeovers or somebody to come in and just like bring the peace, quote unquote peace, because there's all of this kind of.
It is the only solution to climate change to have a single world government with a dominant military that can go and beat up anyone else that doesn't, implement a carbon tax? Right. Or are we going to literally extinct ourselves as a species because we can't coordinate around those problems? And there are people that are going to be free riders or otherwise ne'er-do-wells, right? So do we of course, it's nice if you, when you see the evil and you can coordinate to stop it, to be able to. And I'm sure there's a lot of very well-intentioned people who wrote the SWIFT system and implement sanctions and all of those things. But all the Bitcoin they're mining, all the Bitcoin they're amassing, it wouldn't matter if it didn't have a bunch of people that are otherwise well-intentioned that are giving it value, right? If Bitcoin was worth 10 cents, none of this would matter, right? Like the fact they're mining it with the country's reserves, it just wouldn't be enough money to coordinate humanity to do much evil. But when you're talking about $100,000 per Bitcoin, many orders of magnitude higher, suddenly it is, right? And so it's, well, how much damage can you do due to people's belief that censorship resistance does more good than harm, right? The aspects, the memes that give Bitcoin value at a market level so that people in the US are buying it and are essentially supporting the price of an asset held by dictators and autocrats, right? That there's a belief mindset, there's a belief war that's happening where the values of Bitcoin are held in contrast to the currency manipulation values being run by the US, right? Where they're going to print up what's the national debt at 38 trillion, right? So we have competing beliefs, religiosity, right? And a war that's taking place in real time. And I would say that the blockchains as a technology, regardless of the token value, blockchains as a technology lower the friction so that everyone around the world can choose how to express their thesis on this topic, right? So we have because of communication technology, and because of the ability to swap assets one for another with such low friction, everyone is making a choice, whether they know it or not, into what sort of belief system they are supporting based on how they hold their wealth.
To me, this reminds me a lot, and I don't know if I want to twist this into something like the beginning of a conclusion, but one of the, to me, most impactful papers I read in graduate school is Bruno Latour's drawing things together. Latour's not an art historian. This is like his attempt at like thinking about the Renaissance and many different things. But the piece basically ends with this argument that like history is governed by the transaction cost of communication. Like there's like a moment where in the early scientific revolution period, it becomes easier to compare somebody else's maps to yours. It's not about looking back at the sky. It's about looking next map to map, right? So the idea of long distance communication and sharing of like information, and then eventually information about money, and then money itself and trade goods, et cetera, like that's the feed forward of history. And to me, like the argument you just made is the one that I hear again and again all the time of like, this is why crypto is doing something good for society. And yet we see that these speed ups have these fall on attempts, right? And Andrew, maybe I'll even kick this back to you. I didn't intend it to, but this is sort of where my brain is landing now, that like the University Center for Human Values, right? And it's like a really interesting organization because it's full of historians and ethicists. And those two things, like you and I have juggled this a little bit too, right? Where there's like the impulse to understand something historically. Carolyn said, oh, I got no advice for the future. And this somehow feeling, it's like, well, if you don't have anything to say for the future, like how could anyone? How can we think about these things that are clearly important to try to put some kind of ethical framework around? And Andrew, maybe, yeah, can you help me figure out how we like go forward, not just in the next 8 minutes of this call, but like with a research agenda or with something to do productively here?
Yeah, Andrew, help us.
Yeah, related to the blockchain, you mean?
Specifically related to the blockchain.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I was asked by the University Center for Human Values to be on the steering committee of the D Center in order to, I mean, it was in part just because my brother was investing in crypto. My best friend was really interested in Dogecoin, kind of nihilistic impulse, really. So my interest in this space has been developing over the last couple of years as I've been serving in this capacity. But I don't feel like I have a clear view of like how exactly values would map onto the space in a new way. I mean, I see that some phenomena are moving very fast, that there are these analogs to religious history, that there are philosophical questions that have come up and are interesting. But in terms of a kind of big picture, like template for how ethics and values applies to the blockchain space, that's like above my pay grade.
Maybe not ethics and values as writ large, but the idea of like using the lessons of history to guide ethical thinking in applied domains, right? Of which blockchain I know is only one within the human values. So at least I've heard from my position, like I'm a humanist, but I'm employed in the School of Engineering. And the gossip on my side of the street is like all of these centers, the robotics center, bioengineering, like whatever it is, they're going to get somebody that's kind of like you, that's like the ethicist to think about like the relationship between human and animal, like that is definitely a proud research tradition at Princeton. And like, how have those people helped the bioengineers think about what it is they ought to do in their work? And can we draw any of that into what it is we're trying to do here?
Yeah, and I just want to underscore, you mentioned the historical, and I was going to jump in after Carolyn had spoken and kind of push back on her self-deprecation there, because as a historian, like that brings immense value.
I mean, just to be clear, I think studying history makes the world better, because I think we need spaces. So what I mean is there's not a quick pipeline between intellection and action for me. We need people that act, but then we need people that are allowed to think, because thinking without the pressure of doing is actually tremendous. That's my whole bit, right? Like erudition is activism. Like we need people that are allowed to think profoundly and deeply and have conversations with y'all who are doing things in the world, and open-mindedly having conversations with people that are doing things in the world. But I feel really strongly that there's something in me that needs to be able to like monk out hermetically in the library to be 100%. Useful. Right, 100%. To be an excellent educator, to be an excellent researcher. Because if I were making money in that way off of, or if my paycheck was coming from the blockchain, say, I would have a different perspective than I do with having, like I'm in this world, but I am treating this as an intellectual object to think about and with. So definitely, I think ethics, yes, but I'm just not sure there's this, these conversations have to happen like we're doing today. But I mean, I don't think of myself as a consultant per se. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's more like that. I think of myself as a researcher and a scholar that cares about these issues.
I like that distinction between people out there doing things in the world and then us. But I mean, I was a little worried about JT calling this the professor's roundtable because I wasn't sure if anybody would show up for it.
Yeah, I know, man. What a
That's the thing,
what a buzzkill.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, I think the question that Carolyn, we still have to answer is, yes, we have this incredible privilege to sit around and think in our little centers, but why should anybody listen in?
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I think that's I still try, like we try, right? Like you'll try to have questions that are motivated by things that matter for the world. Like I tend to pick topics. I did truth media and fake news in 2017, but then you try to bring this longer term, more subtle, more nuanced perspective into the environment, hopefully, because it's a democratic poetics, let's call it, right?
I think there can be these mediating and bridging spaces, and I think that's what decenter, is valuable for, right? It's mediating between this kind of withdrawn reflection and like full action to be almost like a playground of kicking around and testing out ideas with an eye toward implementation, right? And so I think those kinds of spaces are so crucial for allowing us to kind of test these things, not fully just abstractly, but not like with lives on the line, hopefully right away. But testing them in within certain parameters.
I want to throw this out there. I know only got a couple of minutes left, and these are some ideas I was thinking about when I invited you all to come on the call. And thanks again for coming. And you folks sit in institutions, most of you, and you're surrounded by libraries and intellectual materials that cover millennia of what is money and what is religion. And what strikes me with the blockchain, in the world hasn't really seen anything like it because it's not quite money, but it definitely is technology. But what I'm worried about is how quickly we're going to be able to adapt to this technology. For instance, from the moment the printing press was invented until basically every city in the world had a newspaper was several hundred years, right? The invention of the car to man on the moon was 50 or whatever, invention of what I'm saying is blockchain is really not that old, and it's already moving trillions of dollars worth of assets in real time every year, and it's only getting faster. And so I guess my question is what do you think the libraries at Princeton and beyond are going to be looking like? Like, you guys are all early days talking about this stuff. If you zoom out 100 years from now, I mean, this really is like the razor edge of the ethics question and the question of what is money on a global scale. And I'm just curious where you think we're headed with automation and AI. And I think blockchain being the absolute language of those things. I know Logri's on the call, and I know we're running out of time. Yeah. But I didn't know if anybody wanted to
I want to turn that question around to you quickly, let my colleagues answer, and then at least I have to go to something else. But so with the libraries, right? What are the libraries going to have? So we didn't quite land this ship this one time, but it's a good example. So I think you should give your archives to a library, right? Like the archives of this. This is something that if we can find the right project for one of Carolyn's graduate students or Devin's students to study the historical record you have put together, that's going to answer that question in practice.
Thank you, Michael. Michael Mizels, Princeton University. Thank you for joining today.
You can stick around for one or two more minutes, but I want to hear Devin and Andrew's answer to that question.
God, yeah. I mean, I'm kind of apocalyptic and dystopian, but I think we're headed toward corporate-run nation states. The major corporations will issue their own currencies, maybe adopting a crypto model or at least a digital currency, and that will be the sort of fiat currency for like the next sort of stage of where we're going until something else happens. But there will be perhaps fringe freedom fighting liberative movements that are still using decentralized cryptocurrencies to resist these new corporate run spaces.
I mean, I'm probably a pessimist too, though I like to think about hope quite a bit. I do think you could be a hoping pessimist. But just about the libraries, I mean, maybe one thing libraries are going to do is be a kind of host for various kinds of provenance proving mechanisms. So it's like, watermarking will become a big deal again, and the library will be the place somehow that says this is an authentic video, where all the rest of this is just slop. And that might actually involve the blockchain in interesting ways.
100%.
That's true. That's a great point, Andrew. Like, I mean, I think I have something similar, which is I think, we persist and we have persisted, and there are centers of knowledge that are here to sort of help the verification process in a world where truth and fiction is becoming increasingly difficult to differentiate. I have a similar feeling that this is what the library and the universities need to kind of hold. That's the ground we're holding, and then what that means, maybe the blockchain can be mobilized in that fight, right?
It definitely can. I can talk about on a different call sometime. That's definitely an hour-long topic for exactly how provenance trails and AI can be used offensively to prevent misinformation. And anyway, it's a long talk.
We have people working on this topic here too, and Jeremiah is going to say we're happy to think about a sequel. And I think the idea of the changing role of the universe, the changing role of the university, is something that's very near and dear to my heart too. Right? Trad Ac and Trad Rel are even older than Trad Phi, and maybe more interesting to disrupt.
Excellent. Okay.
It's been a real pleasure, Jeremiah. I hope we get to do this.
I want to do it again. I mean, yes, I like it. We limit it to an hour because that means we have to get together again.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And we were aware that you're not a big fan of airline flights, and so we really appreciated you coming up to New Jersey.
By the way, that's the best barbecue sauce I've ever had.
Yes, it is, isn't it? That's
so good.
That's a shout out to Cowtown Barbecue Sauce, Kansas City. Not a sponsor for the Night of the Living sauce. Even better someday would be to get you all together. I can cook some vegetarian stuff too, man.
I think we got to get down to KC.
I think you do too.
That's what I'm talking about.
Man.
I'm a road tripper myself, Jeremiah.
Are you?
Those airlines.
I'm going to be
conditional probabilities, man. You know what I'm talking about.
You have a nicer car
in
than
absolute
the rest
sense.
of us do.
Conditional probabilities are the problem.
Well, I'll be sure to give you guys an email next time I host one here. I'm about 20 minutes from the airport. It's easy to get here. It's 2 hours from everywhere in the United States. That's the best part about living in the flyover country. So, hey, thank you so much, the D Center family, Princeton University. You guys have been amazing. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you on the next one.
Thanks.
Okay.
Good.
Got it. Appreciate it. Be
Thank
well.
you.
All right. Thanks, Jeremiah. It was lovely. I really enjoyed this. Thanks for having me. Say hi to the cows and the prairie for me.
Hey, the inside baseball for those of you that are tuned in on YouTube and X is Carolyn's not actually from Geneva, but us Midwesterners can find each other in the crowd. So
it's so true. It's so true. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This has been this is really was something super special. And thanks again to Mike Meisels for connecting all the professors. Originally, I was just asking Mike if he wanted to join a call, and then we ended up like putting together a panel from that event at Princeton. And I know Andrew's he's kind of like, if you call it a professor's roundtable, nobody will show up and listen. That's not true. That's not true. This was really enlightening, and I can't wait to do it again. And thank you to LogrisTheBard, our technical interviewer, for helping out on this one. Let me just open this sucker up here. It's dailydoots.com. And I haven't read these ahead of time. We are going to refresh a page just one more time. I know I just loaded the page, but I'm going to do it anyway. Let's get right into it. Our top 10 of this week: Aiden Cairo at 118, Ethical Trade at 119, Henny Abu at 134, number 7, Crypto Currency at 135, JS Tears at 141, 168 for Tricky Troll, and Benito 2030 at 178, Super Fizz at 241, LogrisTheBard climbing up this week to 251, and Harog sitting at the top of the heap at 304. Weekly roundups, here we go. Our Trinity for today: Day Trader by H chimes in Ethereum, Frank the Tank with a ratio of 0.0343 and a price of 31.14 by Alexis Cap, Alexis EF, and JS Tears with our haiku of the week: a few to annoy, Venezuela Viceroy, oil and gas enjoy. A few to annoy Venezuela Viceroy oil and gas enjoy. Okay. Thank you so much, JS Tears, for the haiku of the week. Clam Chota says, eat, take my energy. Iter ad astra, all hail the eternal crab. Types in 3111 on the price. Evil Jordan is our ship post of the week. I think, yeah, I made a transaction on mainnet swapping ETH to USDC, and since then have received over 60 phishing transactions of minuscule amounts of USDC. I almost have 30 cents worth collected now. Thanks, scammers. It's free real estate. So he's got 30 cents of scam attempts sent to his wallet. My gosh, these people. That's amazing, though, to get that much money. All right. So this is why people consider ETH to be competing against BTC. This is Noodle Salad 3000. Can someone explain to me what is the strategy with price where ultimately you always compete against Bitcoin? I learned we don't talk about direct dollar value, but always the relation to BTC price. So far, so good, understood. Like, I also understand value building. However, it seems price building is non-existent. Bitcoin uses tricks like MicroStrategy to collect investors, which then attracts new investors, and they get a flywheel effect. I also learned that with liquidity farming, it was an approach to use such flywheel effect. However, I also saw that Ethereum, there is so much building that everyone builds their own tokenomics or token economies on layer 2s, and all layer 2s compete, given that there is no direct link, but always L2 goes to L1, goes to L2. So you get this fragmented economy, which means splitted interests. It doesn't sound game theory stable. If you could push your own L2 token instead of ETH, it is more incentivized. Staking also isn't that sexy if the price is not that attractive, or at least the outlook. Not sure about other players besides Bitcoin. Solana is sometimes mentioned, but seems not much else to be able to compete at a global level. Is there some strategy ongoing, or is this one of those forbidden knowledge things like we don't talk about price? Ah, interesting. Spicy.
Recording.
Let's see. I ended my recording here for Zoom. Edmund Edgar, fellow moderator, responds, Deuter number 43 for this week. Quoting this, I learned we don't talk about direct dollar value, but always the relation to BTC price. So far, so good. Understood. Edmund Edgar says, this is an old ETH finance brainworm dating back to the days when people thought BTC and ETH were competing for the same network effect. They thought that the price was a key part of being the main network. And when the ETH price exceeded the BTC price, that would drive a load of users from BTC to ETH, which would in turn increase the ETH price and decrease the BTC price. So they tracked it kind of religiously. But it turned out that Ethereum got a bigger network than BTC in terms of basically everything. Ethereum users think it is important, and that didn't cause the price to flip, because BTC and ETH are used for different things. But during the period before people knew this, they got into a load of pissing matches with Bitcoin users and care a lot about winning on this otherwise unimportant metric. So they still talk about it a lot. Boy, there's some other replies here. I'm going to keep going just for the sake of time. But I want to do a special shout out to Haunted Jockstrap, who has been a rising star lately and spending a lot of time responding to people. And of course, Edmund Edgar, he's always been here. But Haunted Jockstrap, I've noticed his name come up quite a bit. So shout out to you. I want to see... Yeah, there's quite a bit back and forth here with them. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Very good. Life Reboot, user Life Reboot, Deuter number 1 for this week. Shout out. Asked about investor analysis frameworks with detailed responses from Whispered State and Haunted Jockstrap. Again, Haunted Jockstrap gets a shout. It looks like it was deleted. I'm sorry. Yeah, Life Reboot deleted their post. Okay, but I will read Haunted Jockstrap on this one. It's about the metrics. I agree with your metrics. When to sell is as much a lifestyle decision as it is one to make based on metrics, in my opinion. Personally, I'm not here for short-term financial goals. But once some medium long-term goals are achieved on paper, I'll be selling some to lock that in no matter how bullish I am. The metrics are guiding me that I'm still in the right place. But when it's time to leave personally, partly. As far as I'm concerned, something like total value lock should continue to climb this year with the expected adoption from TradFi. A major reversal in that trend outside of TradFi Black Swan event would have me reevaluating. I believe this is the year. I like the other comment as well, that a bullish outcome sell signal will be when you see mainstream adoption of Ethereum in your day-to-day life. Like if my tech illiterate father is paying for coffee with stablecoins, or my crypto hater friends have Aave on their phones, etc. We all invested in this partly because we believe that would be the outcome. Seeing market penetration of Ethereum like that would indicate to me that I've captured a lot of the upside in at least the medium term. Okay, and AGI 44, another duder number one making the weekly rounds. AGI 44, and this is considers what makes Ethereum, or what might make Ethereum shine. It might be that either Bitcoin needs to collapse or Ethereum needs to ossify as well before we see any meaningful price change. Forever crab till the protocol is good enough, and now people can focus solely on L2's better UX merchant integration. It would make sense. Why should Ethereum become more valuable than it already is? It's eternal crab versus infinite human stupidity. Just how long is it going to take for the masses to understand Bitcoin is fundamentally flawed? Most never will. They're sheep and won't care or bother to understand. See what I did there? They just want things that work and don't care about how. I'm keeping my popcorn ready for around the next halving. Sooner or later, it's game over and a massive wave of change will come. People will cry. Why did no one warn us? I've been lied to. See, can't trust technology. It's always failing eventually. This is why we have banks and governments to protect ourselves from our own stupidity. I disagree on that part, but anyway, that's when Ethereum will shine or perish under the global wave of distrust towards all crypto, all being lumped together as if it's all the same thing that can't be trusted anymore. Will Ethereum survive? Time will tell. What I think is more likely and better for all of us is another long, painfully slow bear market with no violent crashes. Just a slow, steady down so that the Bitcoin issue can resolve itself in a less volatile way. Ethereum will survive all bear markets. It does not rely on miners needing to pay huge electricity bills. Bear markets is where the truth surfaces and old waste gets abandoned. And I'm going to interject here. It's also where you make your best friends. Bull markets are full of, well, bullshit. I'll see you all in 2026. 12 Meatballs. Hey, shout out 12 Meatballs. Duder number 46 shares their experience of DPIN Day. A bit belated because I got trapped by Reddit filters. I'm here to serve you. But my final Dev Connect article is up. I went to DPIN Day and now I want to monetize my vacuum cleaner. It's my typical oversharing style of overview. You have been warned. 12 Meatballs, I know you're sitting in the chat. I'm not going to read all this, but I am going to read the first part of it at least. The truth, I only signed up to DPIN Day because I remembered it was something that LogrisTheBard was excited about. I had no idea what it actually was. Logri said that we should all look into DPIN. We would not regret it. I tried. I regretted it. 2 weeks later, the please join us for DPIN Day email arrived in my inbox. Fine, I thought, I'll show him, and began a panicked crash course in whatever it was I'd apparently agreed to attend. DPIN, which stands for Decentralized Physical Infrastructure Network, is indeed a hot topic because it offers a tangible innovation, building physical infrastructure using blockchain technology with tokens that have actual practical use. DPIN offers the chance to shift ownership of physical infrastructure from centralized players to community-driven networks. Now, the hunt is on for real-world problems that DPIN can solve. Early that morning, a small bug triggered by a change in data permissions crashed the Cloudflare routing machines. Half the online world seemed to disappear. People stared at their phones as they arrived at the venue. Depend Day Buenos Aires was hosted at Art Lab by Fluence, a decentralized serverless computing platform, and Filecoin, a decentralized storage network built on blockchain technology. The venue calls itself a creative laboratory and cultural center, which translates to a dark room with blue LEDs crisscrossing the ceiling and techno thumping in the background. The vibe is nightclub rave meets airport lounge. I stumble in from the blinding sunshine to find half a dozen black tables scattered across the floor, each one covered in plushies and stickers with catchy slogans like, "Take back the FOC-ing cloud." It's no secret that Filecoin are going to announce their cloud service today. An open bar offers coffee, water, and a variety of juices for those of us foolish enough to arrive on time, which by Buenos Aires standards means we're criminally early. God dang it, you got a gift for language. Tom Trowbridge, co-founder of Fluence and our MC of the day, sits across from me, frantically finishing up his slides. Outside, Cloudflare is just as frantically trying to revive a collapsing internet after an outage of over 5 hours. Me? I'm just trying to work out what I signed up for. And we got an image here, it looks like. So there's an image from Depend Day. You could read the rest of this. It's on dailydoots.com, or you can look at the front page of Reddit on the R Ethereum. I went to Depend Day, and now I want to monetize my vacuum cleaner. 12 Meatballs is also a producer for this show and helps out behind the scenes. So thank you so much for doing this. Oh, what's this down here? There's an EV Mavericks production. There you go. Thank you so much, 12 Meatballs. You got a gift, my friend. All right. Good stuff. LogrisTheBard considers portfolio positioning for 2026. I am going to take a drink here. I don't have the Just Keep Chugging song loaded up. You're just gonna have to sit here while I do this, huh? This podcast is not brought to you by Sonic. It's just water. I found an old Sonic cup on the side and put water in it. All right, Logri, think about what's coming this year and how to position my portfolio. Oh boy. Number one, I give it above even odds that the U.S. government shuts down again, which will have a negative impact on markets eventually if it drags on like it did last year. Hold on one second. Number two, the U.S. has turned on the money printer again, and the debt is parabolic at this point, so I'm expecting a return of inflation. This probably means I should be holding more euros and maybe precious metals. But number three, there are dozens of mines coming online, I'm assuming precious metal mines, in 2026 and selling covered puts on precious metals. I don't see how the parabolic rise in silver and gold this year can sustain all of this new supply hitting the market. So maybe not holding precious metals past Q1 or Q2 of this year. These mines might take a while to come online, but a lot of gold mines started set up in Q3 of 2025. So we should start to see that extra supply this year. This implies selling precious metals and back to euros if I want a stable coin past Q1 or maybe Q2 of this year. I made about 10% on a currency trade last year. Seems like I'll be setting up something similar again this year. Number four, I predict the continuation of the rearmament of Europe. Trump's actions last year cemented an increased expense from Europe on defense. And you can be sure this recent rhetoric on Greenland and events in Venezuela today only further that outcome. I'm up almost 100% in 2025 on EUAD, and I'm comfy holding that for another 50% gain over the next 4 years. Step five, I'm bullish tokenization, but it looks to me like DeFi is going to fail to seize the market share. So I'm looking at picking up some Robinhood or Coinbase when their product offerings start to show sizable adoption on chain. Something to watch rather than act on for now. I obviously should have bought Canton on the narrative when I heard the news, but I sat on my hands instead. I'll keep looking for other ways to express this thesis, but for now, I'm just watching the adoption of real-world asset platforms like On Lido, and TradFi to buy based whatever fundamental signals I can nab. Number 6, I think we'll see an AI dip sometime this year. If you look at how much these companies have to make from AI to recoup their capital outlays, you come to some pretty unlikely answers, which says to me we're going to see a dot-com style repricing of these efforts in the next few years. But I'll be prepared for it going into quarter 3. DAI has some amazing tech, but I haven't encountered any protocols that have actual customers. There's a systemic failure of customer outreach for that sector, just like DeFi. Until we change how we do outreach, I only see market caps for that sector continuing to struggle. That's a long topic, though. Number 7, and finally, I'll happily pick up more ETH in the low 2,000 range because I give it good odds. We would at least revisit 3K within 4 years, or if we see both the drawdown in exchange reserves and an elastic responsive price to that drawdown. We saw that briefly with DATs in July and August, but the time to exit was when this elasticity broke. Outside of that, if the market structure bill passes and comes out, well, then I'll probably buy some back for a narrative trade. Otherwise, I have enough and I'm happy farming. In aggregate, I expect this year to be volatile and for there to be a massive unrest in the U.S. from continuing layoffs, the cut of ACA subsidies, unchecked executive power, and the world alienating the U.S. on everything from travel to booze in response to aggressive behavior on the international stage. What other thesis do you all have for this year, and how are you investing for that? And there's a lot of replies here. Hats off to LogrisTheBard for such an incredible write-up and just laying the thoughts out old school like we all should from time to time. It's good. Nice work. I just realized that Logri was on a Zoom call that I canceled. Logri, come to Discord. Shit. Am I the asshole? I'm sorry, Logri. I apologize, bud. Okay. He knows where we are. That was a good write-up, my friend. And also, thanks for your help with the Professors Roundup. You had a lot of good stuff, a lot of good insight there for them to riff on. It was fun. I think they really had a lot of fun. Okay, Substantial Hurry 25, user Substantial Hurry 25, Deuter number 3 shares a cypherpunk adjacent talk by Cory Doctorow. And user Shiftly, Deuter number 13, adds APT down and agentic prob LLMs to our curated playlist. I'm not sure how to read all this, but let's open these up, see what this is. Oh, it's a listen on YouTube. If you want to check it out, cypherpunk stuff. I like that. That's cool. It's an hour-long talk. A post-American enshittification resistant thing. And then there's other ones too. There's some other talks that are listed here at dailydoots.com. Be sure to check those out. And Next Level Fantasy, yes. Next Level Fantasy shares clear instructions for Epoch 10 allocation for Octant. Speaking of Octant, we need to get James back on here and catch up with him. Yeah? All right. The window is open. Go to octant.app. I'm a Patreon. If you have a patron, sorry. If you have GLM locked, make sure to donate or claim ETH rewards at some point in the next 2 weeks. Okay. On Octant app home, make sure your uniqueness score is at least 15 to get full matching. If it isn't, you can update your passport score to prove you're a unique human. I think I am. Let's just open up this bad boy. All right. I agree. Oh, I'm probably going to have to sign a message here. No, not doing that. Not doing it. All right. Anyway, get your uniqueness score up to date. A thread with info on the 24 projects at docs.octant.app. Octant revolves around allocating the yield generated with the 100,000. That is such an amazing number. 100,000 ETH. They've been staked. It's by far the most sustainable public goods funding platform on Ethereum. You can go on and check out all of their metrics. Octant.app/metrics. I'll open this up. No, it's going to ask me to agree to services. I'll probably have to sign again. Maybe not. No, yeah, it wants me to sign in everything. Anyway, there you go. Thank you, Next Level Fantasy. Appreciate that update. And Chris Kind, our last dude for this week, is glad to see that the Morgan Stanley ETF plans now include Ethereum. Yeah, that is news. Chris Kine is a duder number 10. So I guess Ethereum people can spit out that crazy pill from yesterday. Perhaps the Ethereum guy at Morgan Stanley couldn't be bothered to work overtime around Christmas and New Year. So according to the block, there it is. Morgan Stanley widens crypto bet with proposed spot Ethereum ETF after Bitcoin and Solana filings. Yeah. Couldn't be bothered, could you? Awesome. Well, I think that's it for this week. Check out what I'm going to do with this podcast. It's going to take me a little bit of time to edit, but I'm going to go through, edit that podcast and get titles on there for all of the professors and clean that up and publish it as a nice standalone video. I really appreciate everybody joining us and sharing the love on X and subscribing to us on YouTube. I think we might also be streaming on Twitch, maybe not. Whatever. Anyway, I think that's it for this week. I don't know if I had any other. I know that we've got a bunch of guests coming up, and it's good to be back. And Happy New Year to all of you guys. It's been a long time. We had so much going on over the holidays. I had a lot of personal family stuff, as the rest of the world did too. No one special. So, okay. Well, I think that's it. Thanks for subbing and smashing the bells around here. We'll see you on the next one. And on behalf of the EV Mavericks and the R Ethereum subreddit, my name is JT. Cheers and big hugs from Kansas City. I know that we've got a bunch of guests coming up, and it's good to be back. And Happy New Year to all of you guys. It's been a long time. We had so much going on over the holidays. I had a lot of personal family stuff, as the rest of the world did too. No one special. So, okay. Well, I think that's it. Thanks for subbing and smashing the bells around here. We'll see you on the next one. And on behalf of the EV Mavericks and the R Ethereum subreddit, my name is JT. Cheers and big hugs from Kansas City.